There's a silent kind of pain that almost all of us have felt at some point, the sting of betrayal. It's not the sharp ache of a physical wound or the harsh blow of an insult. It's deeper, the kind that cuts when trust is broken by someone you once believed in. A friend, a loved one, a partner, someone you once handed your heart to, is now the reason you doubt your own worth. Why would they do that? What did I do wrong? Was there any way to prevent this? Those questions loop in your mind like a needle stuck in a broken record. You feel anger, sadness, the urge to speak up to defend yourself, to prove you're not someone to be walked over. But will acting on that really set you free? Or will it just keep the wound bleeding longer? In Buddhism and Zen, there is another way to face betrayal, not through battle, but through something far more powerful, a silent strength. And that's what we're about to explore. 1. Forgiveness is not a favor, it's a release. Some wounds don't bleed, but they ache quietly inside for years. A name, a picture, or a familiar phrase is enough to flood you with memories like a tide rising without warning. Have you ever held on to someone in your heart, not because you still love them, but because you never forgave? Forgiveness is often misunderstood as a gift we give to someone else, an act of grace for the one who hurt us. But Buddhism teaches us something far deeper. Forgiveness isn't for them, it's for you. It's a gift you give yourself. Because the one who holds on to resentment is the one who lives in a prison of their own emotions. It's the one who wakes up each day, not to sunlight, but to the ghost of the past. You don't forgive because they deserve it. Most times, they don't even feel sorry. But you forgive because you deserve peace. You no longer need to carry those broken pieces. Forgiveness is setting down a weight you've carried for far too long. Not because it got lighter, but because you finally realized you don't need it anymore. There's a story in the Dhammapada about a man who came to the Buddha furious over an insult. "I can't forgive him," he said. The Buddha gently asked, "If someone brings you a gift and you don't accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The man replied, "It still belongs to the giver." The Buddha smiled, "Exactly. If you don't accept someone's anger or hurt, it stays with them. Don't carry what isn't yours." Forgiveness doesn't mean pretending what they did was okay. It's not saying it's fine when your heart still aches. It doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean trusting them again. It simply means you've decided not to let their actions continue to control your life. You don't have to re-enter the same dark room. You don't have to let them back into your life. Forgiveness is not opening the door again. It's gently closing it without rage and walking your own path with a lighter heart. You might think, "I can't do this. I still hurt." And that's okay. Forgiveness isn't a switch. It's a process. It's choosing day by day not to replay the story. Every time your heart tightens, you return to your breath. You choose to love yourself more than you want to stay in pain. Forgiveness is healing, not by ignoring the wound, but by facing it, breathing through it, and slowly letting it go. Each time you forgive, you peel off a layer of armor. You take one step closer to peace. The Buddha said holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal with the intent to throw it at someone else, you are the one who gets burned. How many times have you held on to that coal, thinking they deserve to suffer, only to burn yourself? If you pause and look closely, you'll see the one suffering most is you. They may have moved on. They may not even remember, but you are still there, reliving it as if your pain could change the past. Forgiveness is telling yourself, I choose peace. I choose not to live in the shadows anymore. I choose happiness. The deeper truth is, the more you hold on to resentment, the further you drift from the kind, wise self within you. But the moment you let go, you return. You come home to who you really are. And the beautiful thing, when you learn to forgive, you don't just heal yourself. You ripple peace into the world around you. Because someone who carries no hatred spreads no pain. Someone who walks through life without armor or weapons, only a calm heart, that person becomes a refuge. You don't have to rush. You don't have to be noble. Just ask yourself each day, how much longer do I want to carry this wound? And one day you'll realize you don't. You don't need to explain. You don't need to remember. You'll simply smile. Not because you forgot, but because you finally moved on. And that's when you'll know you've truly forgiven. Not for them, but for you. 2. Those who hurt others are often carrying hurt themselves. Have you ever wondered why someone would choose to hurt another person? Why someone might say cruel things betray your trust, or do something seemingly unforgivable, especially to someone who once loved them deeply? For many, the easiest answer is they're bad, they're selfish, they're heartless. But is that the full truth? Or could it be that their actions are just echoes of a pain they never got to heal? In Buddhist teachings, we learn that no one can give what they do not have. A person who lacks love within will struggle to show kindness. And someone carrying silent wounds inside will often spread that pain to others, not because they want to hurt anyone, but because they don't know any other way to cope. Once, a disciple asked the Buddha, "Why do people harm each other?" "Lord," the Buddha smiled and replied, "Because they are suffering, and in their ignorance, they believe causing pain to others will somehow ease their own. You see, the people who hurt us are not always strong. Often they are the weakest ones, driven by unhealed wounds, unresolved memories, and fears they haven't yet faced. Maybe they were once a child who was never truly understood, or an adult who kept pretending to be okay while falling apart inside. And now, in the way they lash out, push people away, or react in anger, it's really a silent cry for help that no one has ever heard. This is not to excuse harmful behavior, but it is a doorway to understanding. It's the first step to seeing them not with resentment, but with compassion. Because the truth is, you don't have to forgive right away. You don't have to stay in a toxic relationship. But if you can understand the root of their pain, your heart becomes lighter. The anger softens, the bitterness fades, and in its place, there's only the calm clarity of someone who can say, "Ah, they acted that way because they were hurting." The Buddha once taught, when a person is pierced by a poisoned arrow, the priority is not to ask who shot it, or from where, or what the arrow is made of. The priority is to remove the arrow and begin healing. Likewise, when someone wounds you, you could spend years asking why. But the more important question is, how can I heal myself without staying trapped in the pain they caused. And part of that healing is recognizing that the other person is not your enemy. Their ignorance, pain, and anger are. They too are just a human being trying to survive. Sometimes lost, sometimes broken, and sometimes hurting others in the process. I know, hearing this can feel unfair. You might ask, but what about my pain? Who will be held accountable? You have every right to feel hurt, to grieve, to be angry. But beyond that, you also have the right to choose a different path, one that's no longer defined by what others have done to you. A path of understanding, of compassion, of inner maturity. And the beauty of it is when you can see the one who hurt you as someone who's suffering rather than someone who's evil. You don't just heal yourself. You contribute to healing this world, a world already full of wounds left unheard. There's an image I love: the torch. Holding on to anger is like carrying a burning torch. It might light your way for a while, but if you never put it down, it'll scorch your own hands first. So instead of carrying that flame forever, what if you just laid it down gently? Not for them, but for you. So you can walk forward with open hands and a heart no longer afraid. Understanding this isn't easy, but every time you choose to see the one who hurt you with eyes of compassion, you move a little closer to true freedom. Buddhism doesn't teach us to be weak. It teaches us to be strong enough to look at another's pain without letting it harden our hearts. Strong enough not to retaliate, not to prove anything, and still stand tall in the middle of life's storms. Let your compassion be more than a concept. Let it become a way of living. Because understanding the one who hurt you is how you begin to heal yourself. And that too is liberation. 3. Letting go is a conscious act, not a passive one. There's a common misunderstanding many people carry that letting go means giving up. That when you stop reacting, when you don't fight back, when you choose silence, it's a sign of weakness. But if you've ever truly let go of something that hurt you, you know this letting go takes immense courage. It's not about avoidance, and it's definitely not about denial. It's a conscious, deliberate choice, one where you decide not to keep investing your energy into something that's only causing you pain. You're not silent because you don't know what to say. You're silent because you don't want to get trapped in the endless cycle of right and wrong, win and lose, prove and defend. You're not doing nothing because you're powerless. You're standing still because you've seen the truth. The more you resist, the more you cling. The more you fight, the deeper you get pulled into the negativity someone else has already thrown your way. In Buddhism, there's a profound concept called wu-wei, which doesn't mean inaction, but acting without being driven by anger, ego, or the need to control. It's the deep wisdom of knowing every time you react in anger, you are watering the seeds of suffering inside yourself. I once heard a Zen story that stayed with me. A young monk was being insulted and slandered by someone in the village. His students, upset by the injustice, asked him, "Master, aren't you going to defend yourself? Don't you want to speak up?" The monk simply smiled and said, "If someone places a bundle of dry wood before me, I can choose to light it or not. But if I do light it, the first thing that will burn is me." You see, choosing not to set the fire doesn't mean you're afraid of it. It means you know your inner peace is not worth burning down. When someone betrays you, speaks behind your back, or treats you unfairly, your first impulse might be to respond, to clear your name, to reclaim justice. And sometimes that's necessary. But other times, the most powerful thing you can do is to not respond at all. Not because you're weak, but because you're strong enough not to let them control your mind. Letting go, in its deepest sense, means you've seen clearly what is hurting you, and you've chosen not to cling to it anymore. You breathe through it, you look at it, and then, like a dry autumn leaf, you gently let it fall away. No resistance, no grasping. Just the understanding it no longer needs to stay. The Buddha once said, "No one can hurt you unless you allow it to happen inside your own mind." This doesn't mean we become cold or unfeeling. It means we learn not to give others the power to shape our emotional world. Yes, you may hurt, but you won't let the hurt define you. Yes, you may stay silent, but that silence comes from wisdom, not from fear. And here's the beautiful thing: when you let go, truly let go, those who tried to control or harm you lose all their power over you. They can talk, they can act, but you are no longer dancing to their tune. You no longer offer your heart as a place for their poison to settle. Ask yourself, if you only had a limited amount of energy to spend each day, would you use it to be angry, to fight battles that don't serve you? Or would you use it to live deeply peacefully with the people who truly love you? Letting go isn't about apathy. It's about discernment. It's about knowing what's truly worth holding on to and what's only draining your soul. Some people may call you weak for walking away, for not fighting to the end. But let's be honest, fighting someone else is easy. Fighting your own ego, that's the real challenge. To stay silent while your heart burns, that is power. That is mastery. In Buddhist practice, we speak of the virtue of patience beyond anger. But it's not about bitter endurance. It's a patience rooted in wisdom. A strength that doesn't suffer. A stillness that stays peaceful, even in the storm. So if someone hurts you, and you choose not to strike back, remember this: it's not defeat, it's victory. Victory over your reactivity. Victory over the past. Victory over the urge to let your peace be stolen. You don't need to shout to prove your strength. You don't need to win to know your worth. You just need to know this: you are awake. You are aware. And that's more than enough. Because over time, something miraculous happens. The moment you stop holding on to what causes you pain, you don't just become free. You become a refuge, a sanctuary for yourself. A person who knows how to let go is a person who understands what true freedom is. And the greatest freedom isn't going wherever you want. It's being able to stay, to face whatever comes, and remain unmoved. So don't worry when someone says you're not doing anything. Because sometimes, doing nothing is the most powerful thing you could ever do. 4. We can't control others, but we can choose how we respond. There's a truth many of us take years to truly understand. You cannot control other people. You can't control whether someone stays in love with you. You can't control whether someone keeps their promises. You can't even control whether someone hurts you, no matter how much love and kindness you've given them. And let's be honest, coming to terms with that can feel incredibly disempowering. You've tried your best. You've been honest, generous, kind, yet you were still betrayed, still misunderstood, still hurt. Sometimes it's enough to make you cry out, "What did I do wrong?" But here's the deeper truth. Freedom doesn't come from getting others to treat you the way you want. It comes from something much deeper, from learning not to let their actions define you. In the Buddhist teachings, there is a core principle every practitioner must experience. We cannot control the world. We can only control the mind. We cannot change others, but we can change how we respond. It sounds simple, but it's one of the hardest things to live by. Because the ego wants control. It wants everyone to understand us, love us, treat us fairly. And when that doesn't happen, the ego gets angry, wounded, and demands justice. But take a moment to ask yourself, if your peace depends on how others act, who's really in charge of your life? You could walk into a room where someone's speaking badly about you and still choose not to react. You could hear an unfair criticism and still choose not to let it break your heart. Because real peace isn't about how people treat you. It's about not giving them the power to disturb your inner world. Once, a disciple asked the Buddha Lord, "If someone insults me and I don't respond, does that make me weak?" The Buddha replied, "If someone offers you a gift, but you don't accept it, who does the gift belong to?" The disciple said, "To the one who offered it." The Buddha smiled. Just the same, if you don't take in the insult, it remains with the one who gave it. It cannot hurt you unless you let it in. You see, in every situation, your response is your power. It's your choice. It's where you step out of being controlled and step back into yourself. I know it's easier said than done. Sometimes a careless comment keeps you up all night. Sometimes a disrespectful act can break your heart. But that's when your practice truly begins. Not to suppress your emotions, not to pretend you're above it, but to reclaim your freedom. Because if you react out of habit, you're living in reactivity, not in awareness. But if you respond with calm, you take back the reins of your own mind. Like a lake, when a stone is thrown, the water ripples. But if you leave it alone, it returns to stillness. Your mind is the same. Each time you choose not to react, you're letting the waters inside you settle. And it's in that stillness that true wisdom arises. When you understand that others act from their own karma, not because you deserve their behavior, you begin to free yourself from old cycles of pain. You begin to realize that your worth doesn't live in someone else's mouth. It lives in your own eyes, how you see yourself. Yes, you may have been dismissed, misjudged, underestimated, but that doesn't define you. You only become small when you believe you're small. So remember this: no one can take away your worth unless you hand them the key. Inner freedom begins when you decide to keep that key, to be mindful about who gets access to your heart, to stay grounded even when others misunderstand, reject, or oppose you. Because at the end of the day, you are the one who lives with yourself, and only you get to define who you are with awareness, compassion, and unshakable dignity. Hold on to that. That's where true freedom begins. 5. Silence is not avoidance. It's the wisdom of the awakened. There are moments in life when the best thing to say is nothing at all. Not because you don't know how to respond, not because you're weak or afraid, but because you've been through enough noise, enough arguments, enough storms to understand that silence is not an escape. It's the quiet strength of someone who has awakened. Have you ever seen a lake in the early morning? Before the wind blows, before the world stirs. The surface so still, it reflects the entire sky. Clouds pass mountains, stand firm. Sunlight gently touches the water, and everything appears clearly, without needing to be forced, explained, or named. Just silence. And the truth reveals itself. Your mind is just like that. When it's reactive, agitated, always trying to win, clarity cannot exist. But when it's still, you begin to see what's real and what's just noise. There's an old Zen story. A monk was once wrongly accused, misunderstood by his student and the villagers. People waited for him to react to protest, to defend himself. But he didn't. He simply smiled and continued sweeping the temple grounds as usual. One man couldn't take it anymore and asked, "Why don't you explain yourself? Why don't you say something?" The monk pointed to a small stream behind the temple and asked, "Do you hear the sound of the water?" The man nodded. That sound keeps flowing whether anyone hears it or not. Truth is the same. It doesn't need to shout. It just needs time. Some truths can only be seen when the heart is still. And sometimes silence is the only space in which those truths can arise, not because we force them, but because light always finds its way. You might worry, if I don't speak up, they'll misunderstand me. They'll think I'm weak, or guilty, or passive. But here's the thing. When you're steady inside, you no longer need to chase down every rumor, defend your name in every conversation. Because true dignity doesn't come from the opinions of others. It comes from how you live, from the quiet strength that no insult can stain. The Buddha never argued. He simply lived with authenticity. Even when falsely accused, misunderstood, or attacked, he didn't rush to react. He understood every word carries energy. And not every moment or every person is worth sacrificing your peace for. Some people don't need to be convinced. Some words don't need a reply. In some situations, only need your stillness. Time will take care of the rest. Silence, when it comes from an awakened heart, is not surrender, it's mastery. You know when to speak and when to simply breathe. You know that not every injustice needs to be corrected with words, because sometimes truth doesn't need to be shouted. It just needs to be protected, gently, in silence. Imagine someone yelling, blaming, attacking with harsh words. If you respond with anger, you're only feeding the fire. But if you remain silent, if you refuse to react, the fire dies out on its own. Silence doesn't fight the fire. It starves it. And that is not weakness. It's wisdom, knowing the fire isn't worth burning your peace over. Silence also gives you space to hear your own deeper voice. When you're not busy reacting to the world, you can finally ask, what do I truly need right now? What am I really living for? The answer doesn't come from the noise out there. It comes from the quiet you're brave enough to sit in. I know. It's not easy to stay calm in a chaotic world. But every time you choose silence instead of reaction, you're building a deeper strength. And that strength is the soil where wisdom, compassion, and true freedom grow. So the next time you find yourself surrounded by gossip, by judgment, by misunderstanding, and you choose not to speak, don't think of it as losing. It might just be your greatest moment of growth. Because the strongest person isn't the one who wins every argument. It's the one who keeps their peace when there's nothing left to prove. That's the wisdom of silence, and the quiet sign of someone who has begun to truly awaken. 6. Understanding someone's nature means understanding their limits. One of the most painful things we experience in life isn't that people are cruel. It's that we expected them to be better. We expected someone to understand us because we had listened to them deeply. We expected someone to be honest because we had always lived with integrity. We expected someone to stay loyal because we had never turned our backs on them. And when they did the opposite, we didn't just hurt from their actions. We shattered from the collapse of who we believed they were. But here's the truth. When you truly understand someone's inner nature, you stop expecting them to act beyond their own emotional limits. You stop asking someone who is still blind in ignorance to behave like someone enlightened. It's like expecting someone who's never learned how to swim to stay afloat in a raging ocean. The Buddha once taught, one who is not awakened acts from ignorance. One who suffers unconsciously creates more suffering. And when you truly grasp this, you no longer ask, how could they do that? Instead, you gently say, because that's where they are right now. Imagine someone stumbling in the dark. They can't see, so they trip, bump into others, maybe even hurt you. Would you blame them? Of course not, because you understand they couldn't see. In this life, there are many people like that. Not blind in their eyes, but blind in their awareness. They don't see themselves clearly, so they hurt others easily. They've never learned how to love in a healthy way, so they love with control or with neglect. They've never embraced their own fears, so they respond with anger and defensiveness. People who hurt you aren't always bad. They just haven't learned how to live any differently. Now, that doesn't mean you have to excuse their behavior. It doesn't mean you should stay in a toxic relationship. But if you can see them for where they are, not where you wish they were, you'll suffer far less. Because your suffering isn't just about who they are. It's about what you expected them to be. There's a story in the Dhammapada. A man once came to the Buddha and said, "Lord, I've done everything I could, but they're still cold, still ungrateful. What should I do?" The Buddha replied, "You can plant seeds on stone, but don't blame the seed for not growing. Your job is to plant. The soil's job is to bloom. You see, some people are like barren ground, not because you didn't plant enough, but because they're not ready to blossom. So, instead of blaming the seed for not sprouting, simply move on. Find a place with more light and nourishing waters, and continue living kindly for those who are ready to receive. When you stop expecting someone to act beyond their awareness, you begin to free yourself. You no longer agonize over the question, why are they like this? Because you've accepted everyone is on their own path, and someone who doesn't understand themselves can't possibly understand you. Think of the mind as a vessel. A small cup can only hold so much. You can't pour the entire ocean into a teacup and expect it not to overflow. Likewise, you can't expect someone with a narrow heart to treat you like someone with deep compassion. Accepting someone's limits doesn't mean tolerating harm. It means growing wiser. You don't hate them. You don't resent them. You don't look down on them. You simply take a step back and understand this isn't your fault, and it's not your job to fix them. Your job is to protect your own heart, to keep it free of bitterness, blame, and ongoing pain. Maybe someone didn't know how to love you well, but that doesn't mean you're unworthy of being loved well. It only means they weren't capable yet. They didn't understand enough. They hadn't grown enough. And sometimes the greatest act of love you can give is to walk away in peace. Not forcing change, not trying to rescue them, but allowing them to remain where they are while you move forward toward your own light. Because in the end, you weren't born to change others. You were born to live in alignment with your truth, with awareness, compassion, and a peace that doesn't rely on anyone else's growth but your own. 7. Reaction is the ego's trap. There's a moment most of us know too well. Someone says something untrue about you. Maybe it's a false accusation, a passive-aggressive comment, or just an unfair judgment. And almost instantly, something rises inside. You want to defend yourself. You want to prove them wrong. You want them to see the truth, to see you clearly. That first impulse might feel natural, but it doesn't come from peace. It comes from a deeper place where the ego cries out to be validated. I am right. I'm not who they think I am. I have to speak up. And when you follow that urge, you step into an endless loop. Arguments, anger, tension, pain. The very things you were trying to protect, your dignity, your truth, your self-worth, start to blur because of how you react. In Buddhist teachings, the ego, what we call attachment to self, is one of the deepest roots of suffering. Because the ego always wants to be acknowledged, protected, and right. It cannot stand being misunderstood, underestimated, or dismissed. So the moment someone touches that fragile self, we instinctively go into defense mode. But here's something worth remembering. The truly awakened person doesn't need to be validated. They don't need to prove anything to anyone because they've already seen through the illusion of that ego and realize there's nothing left to protect. Imagine the ego as a soap bubble, shiny, delicate, convincing. But in truth, it's just a thin layer of images and expectations. The more attached you are to it, the more you'll always be on guard. Who's about to pop my bubble? Who's threatening my identity? And so you live in tension, easily, hurt quick to react. But someone who is awake lives differently. They don't need shields because they've realized that their real value doesn't live in someone else's eyes. In the middle-length discourses, the Buddha once said, "The wise do not react like the foolish. When insulted, they do not grow angry. When praised, they do not cling to pride. They are like the earth. People can throw garbage or flowers on it, and the earth remains unmoved." So pause for a moment and ask yourself, the next time you feel the urge to argue, to get the last word to set the record straight, what's really driving that? Is it wisdom? Or is it just your ego demanding to be seen? Are you speaking for truth, or because you can't stand being perceived as wrong? The truth is, if you are living with integrity, if you know in your heart that you've done no harm, then no one, no matter what they say or think, can truly diminish you. Because only your own heart defines who you are. But the moment you react, explode, argue, you hand that power over. You're silently telling them, your opinion of me matters so much that I'm willing to lose my peace just to fight back. Awakened beings don't live that way. They don't stay silent out of fear. They stay silent because they see clearly reaction changes nothing. It doesn't feed truth. It doesn't elevate character. It only serves the ego's need to defend itself. There's a story about a man who came to insult the Buddha. The Buddha simply looked at him and smiled. The man, frustrated, snapped, "Do you have nothing to say?" And the Buddha replied calmly, "If someone offers me a gift and I choose not to accept it, then the gift still belongs to them." Words, actions, opinions, they're like gifts. But whether you receive them is entirely up to you. That is the power of inner freedom, to not be dragged into the ego's trap. So the next time you feel the heat rising, stop for a breath and ask gently, am I protecting truth or just my ego? That answer will lead you back to yourself, because someone who lives in truth doesn't need to speak loudly to prove it. Someone who stands strong doesn't need to shout to show it. And someone who is awakened simply lives their truth and lets life reflect it back in silence. When you stop reacting from ego, you are not weak. You're just choosing the higher road, the road of wisdom, of freedom, and of peace that no one can take away. 8. Every action creates karma. Nothing escapes the law of cause and effect. There are moments when you see someone who hurt you, still smiling, still loved, still seemingly untouched by the harm they caused. And you wonder, where's justice? Where's fairness in this world? Why do good people suffer, while those who inflict pain seem to thrive? That's a deeply human question, and a painfully honest one. But in Buddhism, the answer doesn't come from punishment. It comes from a truth far more profound and mysterious as the law of karma. Every action you take, every word you speak, every fleeting thought, every deliberate choice plants a seed. And sooner or later, that seed will bear fruit. Nothing escapes this law. No one is an exception. Think of a seed planted in the earth. You may not see it sprout right away, but that doesn't mean it's dormant. In the darkness, quietly and invisibly, it is awakening, forming, growing, until its results manifest with precision, in the right time, and in a way no one can avoid. The Buddha taught, just as a shadow never leaves the body, karma never leaves the one who created it. And also, no one, no kings, monks, or ordinary people, can escape their own karma. Whoever plants the seed, they are the one who will harvest its fruit. So you don't need to seek revenge. You don't need to take justice into your own hands. You don't need to lash out, retaliate, or plot to make someone feel your pain. Because if you do, you're only planting another seed. And guess who'll be the one to receive its fruit? There's a story in the Jataka tales. A venomous snake had harmed many villagers. People feared it. One day, a wandering hermit came along and with pure compassion calmed the snake. He didn't beat it or threaten it. He simply said, "If you keep harming others, suffering will return to you. Stop before you destroy yourself." The snake listened. It stopped biting. But when the villagers noticed the snake no longer struck, they began to throw rocks at it, beat it, mock it for being weak. Hurt and confused, the snake returned to the hermit and said, "I followed your advice, but now I'm being mistreated. My kindness got me nowhere." The hermit replied, "I told you not to bite, but I never said you couldn't hiss," the meaning, choosing not to take revenge doesn't make you weak. It means you trust a deeper justice and you patiently let it unfold. Karma doesn't need your help. And to be honest, the justice of the universe is always more precise than any human court. There are things your eyes won't see, but your heart will feel. A deceitful person may be praised by the world, but inside they're not at peace. Someone who causes pain may avoid legal punishment, but the karma within has already begun to bloom, and no one can escape their own mind. Just think about this. When you let go of the desire to retaliate, you're not only avoiding bad karma, you're protecting your own peace. Because every time you replay the idea of giving them what they deserve, you're watering seeds of bitterness in your own heart, and that pain, it doesn't just reach them, it hurts you first. I'm not saying you have to forgive immediately, but you can choose something different. You can choose to let go, to not cling, to let karma do what it does best. Let the universe take its course. Trust that nothing happens without leaving a trace. No word is spoken without creating a ripple. No action is harmless if it comes from a harmful intention. And in the meantime, you still have the power to live peacefully. To keep sowing seeds of kindness, patience, and stability within yourself. Because that right there is what you can control. As for the rest, leave that to karma. Eventually, every person will walk through a door they themselves have built. And when they step into the room they created, whether it's filled with light or shadow, peace or suffering, that moment will belong only to them. And you, the one who chose not to step into that cycle again, you're the one who's truly free. 9. The truth is like the sun. It can't be hidden forever. There are moments in life when truth doesn't seem to be on your side, or at least that's how others see it. You get misunderstood. You get blamed. You get labeled with things that have nothing to do with who you really are. And suddenly, you find yourself standing in the middle of a storm, not because you did something wrong, but because people simply aren't ready to see things clearly. You want to shout. You want to prove yourself. You want to grab someone's hand and say, "Look, this is the truth. It's right here, plain as day." But sometimes, no matter how much you speak, no matter how clearly you explain, people don't hear you. Not because you're not convincing enough, but because they're not quiet enough to receive what's true. And in those moments, remember, this truth is like the sun. It may be covered by clouds, but it never disappears. In the Buddha's teachings, there is a deep wisdom. Truth doesn't need to be defended through argument. It carries its own strength. It only needs time. Think about the sky. There are days when heavy clouds roll in. It gets dark. The sun seems gone. But have you ever truly doubted that the sun still exists? No. You know it's still up there, just temporarily hidden. And when the clouds part, the sun returns radiant calm without needing to scream, "I've been here all along." Truth works the same way. Today, people may believe rumors. Today, they may turn their backs on you. Today, your reputation may be tarnished. But if you continue to live with integrity, if you keep your heart aligned with what's right, time will become truth's most loyal companion. In the Samyutta Nikaya, it said, "What is true doesn't need to be painted. What isn't true, no matter how much you decorate, it won't last." A sincere spiritual practitioner doesn't chase after every flame of misunderstanding. They simply keep their inner lamp lit and keep walking. There's an old story. A humble monk lived in solitude on a quiet mountain. One day, villagers came furious. They shouted, "We heard you're the father of this baby. You won't admit it. Shame on you." The monk said nothing. He just bowed his head and took the baby into his arms. He raised the child with deep compassion. A year later, the young woman from the village, overwhelmed by guilt, confessed the monk was not the father. The villagers returned ashamed, asking for forgiveness and to take the child back. The monk didn't scold. He didn't react. He simply said, "Is that so?" That story isn't just about patience. It's about steadiness, about knowing the truth and not needing to prove it. You can choose to live that way. Not everyone deserves your peace just because they doubt you. Not everyone is ready to see clearly, and shouting louder won't open their eyes faster. Because if they're not ready, your words will just echo in the wind. But if you stay true, live well, and don't fight with pride, then your life itself becomes the proof. And in time, the world will see it too. As the old saying goes, real gold doesn't fear fire, and truth, when tested, shines even brighter. So, if you can stay calm when you're misunderstood, if you can choose not to react out of anger or ego, then you're not just protecting the truth, you're living from a place of wisdom. Just look at the sun. It doesn't argue with the clouds. It waits. And when the time is right, it lights up everything without needing anyone's permission. So, if you're in a season where your truth feels buried, don't panic. Don't swing your arms in fear. Just ask yourself, am I living in alignment with my own conscience? If the answer is yes, keep walking, because the truth doesn't need noise to survive. It only needs a steady heart and time, and eventually, the sun will rise again. 10. Choosing peace is more important than proving you're right. There are arguments you win, but somehow walk away more exhausted than ever. You win the logic, but you lose your peace. You get others to agree with you, but your heart feels like a heavy door, just slammed shut, cold, heavy, unsettled. That's the cost of choosing to be right over choosing inner calm. I understand. Being misunderstood, accused, or wrongly judged is painful. It makes you want to jump up and defend yourself right away. No, that's not who I am. You don't get it. Let me tell you the truth. And so you try. You explain. You bring out all your logic examples and tone kind and firm alike. Maybe you silence the other person. Maybe others even side with you. But do you actually feel lighter? Or do you feel like you've just spent your precious energy chasing something that wasn't really worth it? In Buddhism, there's a teaching that goes straight to the heart. We don't need to defeat others. We need to conquer ourselves. And conquering yourself sometimes means knowing when to stop, when the conversation no longer leads to understanding. It means stepping back, especially when being right has become just another fight of egos. Because you see, the ego loves being right. It feels alive when someone agrees with it, when it wins an argument, when it gets the last word. But someone who lives with awareness doesn't chase that kind of ending. They choose peace over being right. I once heard a story from a Japanese Zen master. One day, a man came to the temple and started yelling at a young monk. "You're a fool," the man shouted. The monk grew angry and wanted to argue back, but the elderly master gently stepped in and said to the man, "You're right. I've been a fool many times. And honestly, I still am. Sometimes." The man was stunned and quietly left. Later, the young monk asked Master, "Why did you say that he insulted you?" The Zen master smiled and replied, "If you try to prove you're not a fool, you're wasting energy on someone who has no interest in understanding. But if you truly know who you are, then no insult can touch you." That story still stops me in my tracks whenever I recall it, because it reminds us of something we often forget. Not every battle is worth fighting, and not every truth needs to be spoken out loud. If in order to win a short-term argument, you have to sacrifice the long-term peace in your heart, is that really a win? Maybe you are right. Maybe you were misunderstood. Maybe you do have every reason to speak up. But if you already know the truth within yourself, do you really need the world's approval badly enough to trade your serenity for it? The Buddha said, "A wise person lets go of what doesn't need to be held." And sometimes, being right is one of those things. Because if clinging to it robs you of ease and clarity, then it's not worth it. You know what's beautiful. When you stop reacting, stop arguing, stop trying to prove yourself you're not weak. You're simply living from a deeper place of awareness, a place where you understand no one can take your peace from you unless you let them. And you no longer need others to agree with you to feel at peace with yourself. So next time you find yourself facing a misunderstanding, an argument, or a hurtful comment, ask yourself, what matters more right now? Being right or being at peace? If the answer is peace, then you've already won. A victory with no applause, no recognition, but one that quietly protects you from being swept into the storm. And sometimes, that is the most powerful kind of victory we can ever have. 11. A heart that doesn't flinch in the face of betrayal has already awakened, at least in part. There's a quiet question many of us have carried in our hearts at some point in life. Why does betrayal from someone I trust hurt so deeply? It's not because we're weak. It's because betrayal, at its core, is the collapse of trust, something we've poured our whole heart into building. It doesn't just shatter a relationship. It shakes our faith in people and kindness, and sometimes, even in ourselves. You might be able to meditate peacefully in a quiet forest. You might chant every morning and evening with unwavering devotion. But can you remain steady when the person you trusted most turns their back on you? Or when the one you once protected ends up being the one who wounds you the most? That's when real practice begins. The Buddha once taught stillness in a peaceful place is not true equanimity. True equanimity is remaining unmoved in the middle of a storm and betrayal. It's one of the fiercest storms life can throw at us. No one escapes it. But not everyone walks through it with a heart that stays soft, eyes that stay clear, and steps that don't crumble. A true practitioner of the way isn't measured by how many prostrations they perform or how many hours they meditate each day. They're recognized by this quiet strength. They no longer react harshly to blame. They no longer expect others to always treat them right. And they're no longer crushed when someone walks away. Not because they've stopped feeling, but because they've seen clearly nothing is permanent and no one stays forever. Sometimes betrayal is life's way of reminding you to come home to your own steady self, no longer dependent on anyone to keep you grounded. I remember a young student once came to me teary-eyed. "Master," he said, "I can practice really well until someone close to me betrays me. I get angry, I hurt, and I want to give up. Does that mean I've failed at my practice?" I smiled and replied, "No, not at all. That's when your real practice begins. Because someone who's even slightly awakened doesn't respond with the old conditioned reactions every time they get hurt. They still feel pain, but they don't rush to retaliate. They still feel sadness, but they don't let it pull them into darkness. They sit with the pain like a mother holding a crying child gently with breath, with compassion, until the pain softens. And you know what? To remain calm in the face of betrayal is a rare kind of strength. It's not about being numb. It's about feeling everything, but not letting those feelings control you. The Buddha himself was slandered, opposed, misunderstood by those closest to him. And yet, he didn't respond with anger. He simply saw, understood, and continued walking his path. No need to argue, no need to prove, because he knew betrayal isn't the collapse of morality. It's an invitation to deepen your wisdom. You can live like that too. You don't need a frozen heart to avoid pain. You just need a mind clear enough not to be swept away by it. And you'll come to see freedom doesn't come from never being betrayed again. It comes when even in betrayal, you can keep your heart pure. No bitterness, no hatred, no poison. That is the first step toward awakening. Not some lofty, unreachable step, but something real and humble. The moment you pause before reacting, you breathe, you see clearly, and you choose to forgive, not because they deserve it, but because you deserve peace. So, if today you're carrying the ache of someone turning their back on you, don't rush to blame life. See it as a beautiful test, an invitation to ask, how far have I really come on this journey back to myself? And if you can hold steady through it all, then quietly, gently, you've already stepped through the gate of awakening. No fireworks, no fanfare, but something very real, very sacred, very true. 12. Don't let the wrong person live forever in your mind. There's something strange about life. Someone might hurt you, say something cruel, do something unkind, and then they're gone. Just like that. They move on with their life. But you stay. Not just in the world, but in your own mind. You keep their image alive. You replay that story again and again. You wonder, why did they do that? Or, if only I had responded differently. You ask yourself, do they ever feel guilty? Day after day. It's like you're still living with them, even though they're no longer around. Have you ever noticed this? Some people were only in your life for a few weeks, but they've stayed in your mind for years. Some left long ago, but when their name comes up, your chest still tightens. That's because you've let them take up space in your heart, not on purpose, not consciously. They didn't ask to move in. You didn't invite them. But by continuing to think about them, analyze, resent, blame, you've opened the door, made the bed, and let them live in a room that was meant for your peace. The Buddha once said, holding on to anger is like holding a hot coal with the intent of throwing it at someone else. You're the one who gets burned. And it's true. Every time you think about the person who hurt you, you reopen the wound. You think you're hating them or punishing them in your mind, but in reality, you're punishing yourself. The one who wronged you might have already forgotten you. They could be living a whole new life with no memory or remorse for what they did, but you're still carrying them with every restless night, every quiet moment. Isn't that ironic? They've left your life, but you haven't left the pain because you haven't let go of the anger. I once heard a Zen master say, "Not everyone who lives in your heart deserves to be there." At first, it sounded harsh, but the more I reflected, the more compassion I found in those words. Your heart, your mind is sacred. It's meant to be a space for love, wisdom, and peace. So why let someone who hurt you take up space there? If you're holding on to someone like that, look deeper. Not to analyze them again, but to ask yourself, how much time, sleep, and energy have I given them? Then ask, isn't that enough? Letting go doesn't mean denying your pain. It doesn't mean pretending it never happened. Letting go simply means you no longer give them the power to live inside you. The Buddha taught mindfulness, knowing what's happening inside your own mind, knowing what you're thinking, what you're feeling, what you're holding on to, and whether it still serves you. And if you realize that you're holding on to someone who brings nothing but exhaustion, confusion, and hurt, then maybe it's time to let them go. Gently, without hatred. Just, I need space for peace now. You can start with a single breath. Each time they appear in your mind, instead of asking why, just breathe. And whisper to yourself, I see you rising in my mind. But today, I choose not to keep you. At first, it may be hard, like cleaning out a room full of memories, some painful, some sweet. But every time you clear a little more space, you make room for life, for joy, for freedom, for better things, because you deserve to live with an open heart. Not because you've forgotten all the pain, but because you've chosen not to let it define you anymore. Let the one who wronged you stay in the past, and you come home to yourself, to the peaceful room in your heart that is finally yours again. And from that space, you'll see forgiveness isn't a favor for them. It's a gift you give to yourself so you can walk lighter, shine brighter, and live freer. 13. The deepest pain doesn't come from what they did, but from the expectations they betrayed. There's a hard truth that most people don't want to admit. The deepest pain in life doesn't come from what someone did to us. It comes from the belief that they would never do such a thing. It's not the action that hurts the most. It's the collapse of our expectations. We suffer because deep down, we were sure they would never do that to me. We thought they understood us. We thought they valued us would stay by our side, keep their promises. And when they didn't, it felt like something inside us shattered. Have you ever felt that kind of pain? Not just disappointment, but a confusion so deep you start asking, was I wrong about who they really are? Then come the spiral of questions. Why would they do this? Was I not enough? Did I miss something all along? But those questions don't bring clarity. They only make the heart more tired because they're attempts to understand something that maybe we just need to let go of. The Buddha once taught, this world is impermanent. Everything changes. People change. Suffering arises when we resist that change. And expectations, that's our mind resisting what is. We create an image of how someone should be, and when they don't match it, we can't accept it. It's not the betrayal that breaks us. It's the belief that they never would. Do you see the difference? Pain doesn't come from reality. It comes from the gap between what is and what we hoped for. If we never had expectations, maybe what happened would have just passed like a breeze. But we gave them our trust, our emotions, sometimes even our soul. And when that breaks, we don't just lose the person, we lose a part of ourselves. That's why freedom isn't about changing others. It's about releasing the idea that they need to fit the image we created of them. I remember a middle-aged woman who came to see me after a Dharma talk. She had been divorced for years, but her eyes still carried sadness. She said, "Master, he betrayed me." But that's not what hurt the most. What crushed me was that I truly believed. He was the kind of man who would never do that. She had moved on. She had forgiven. But the pain lingered. Because that old image of her husband, the one she trusted with all her heart, was still hanging on her wall. I'm not telling you to stop trusting people, but I'm inviting you to trust mindfully, trust without clinging, love without attaching. Open your heart, but stay rooted in yourself. Because if your emotional life depends on how others behave, you'll be like a leaf in the wind. When they're kind, you're at peace. When they change, you fall apart. But when you're rooted in your own center, your own clarity, no matter who changes you, remain steady. That's what the Buddha called a mind undisturbed by the 8 worldly winds: gain and loss, praise and blame, fame and shame, pleasure and pain, and betrayal. It's just one of those winds. Yes, it can shake us. But if we've let go of expectations, if we've truly understood impermanence, then even betrayal can't uproot us. You'll simply observe and say to yourself, they're acting from their own level of awareness. They didn't hurt me on purpose. They just did what they knew. It was my expectation that turned it into pain. And in that moment, you let go. No more blaming. No more resenting. Only a quiet space within you where no old image holds you hostage. You don't need to erase the memory. You don't need to pretend you weren't hurt. You just stop giving that memory the power to define your present. When you let go of expectations, you reclaim your freedom. And in that freedom, even betrayal can't shake you. You stop living to avoid being hurt and start living to understand that pain is part of life, and you are strong enough to walk through it without losing the tenderness of your heart. That is the beginning of wisdom. And it's how you begin to live more lightly, more deeply, and more honestly with yourself. 14. Letting go is a path to freedom, one step at a time. There's something that anyone who's been through heartbreak, betrayal, misunderstanding, or unreciprocated love will eventually realize letting go doesn't happen overnight. It's not some magical moment when the pain just disappears. It's a journey slow, deep, and often challenging. Not a path measured in footsteps, but in every single breath you choose to return to. In every moment you decide not to react, even when your heart is in turmoil. In every act of forgiveness, not because the other person deserves it, but because you don't want to carry their wounds any longer. Letting go is liberation, but it's not an easy road. It requires you to face yourself more than you face the other person, because the real struggle isn't between you and them. It's between you and what you're still holding on to. Expectations hurt pride, the need to be right, or the longing to be seen. I remember one quiet afternoon at the monastery, a young student came to me, eyes full of tears. "Master," he said, "I know I need to let go, but every time I think of them, my chest tightens. I want them to understand how deeply they hurt me. I know that's not the right mindset, but I can't stop." I didn't say much. I simply invited him to sit, and we breathed. That's it. Because sometimes the breath is the first doorway to letting go. Letting go doesn't begin with a decision to forget or move on. It begins with a quiet moment of awareness when you realize, oh, I've been pulled back in again. And then you breathe. You don't fight the emotion. You don't shove the memories away. You breathe with them like holding a crying child close to your chest. You place your hand on your heart and gently say, I see you. I'm not running away, but I'm not letting you carry me either. And with every moment like that, you step deeper into inner freedom. No one sees that step. No one claps. No one even knows it happened. But inside you, a small door begins to open. The Buddha never taught us to let go as a way to escape. He taught us to let go so we could return to ourselves, whole, complete, no longer defined by what others did to us. He said, there is no path to peace. Peace is the path. And that path doesn't begin outside of us. It begins when you choose not to react. When you choose not to throw words back, even when you have every reason to. When you choose to forgive, even while the wound still aches. Not to be the better person, but so that your heart no longer has to carry the weight of anger or the person who caused it. Think about it. Every time you're angry but don't explode, you protect your own energy. Every time you return to your breath instead of getting lost in sorrow, you're learning how to live with awareness. Every time you forgive, you're setting down a burden you've carried for far too long. These are not small acts. They're milestones, steps on the path back to your own freedom. And the most beautiful part, letting go doesn't require them to change. It doesn't need an apology. It doesn't wait for things to feel okay again. It only needs you. It only needs one quiet decision within you. I don't want to live with resentment anymore. I choose peace over being right. I choose to breathe, to release, to keep walking little by little. I won't promise that it will be easy. But I can tell you this, every step you take in letting go frees your heart from another layer of chains. And one day, you'll look back and realize it wasn't that the person changed. It wasn't that the pain disappeared. It was simply that you no longer followed where it tried to lead you. You still remember, but the anger is gone. You still feel sorrow, but the bitterness has dissolved. You're still living the same life, but your heart is wider, lighter, clearer. That is freedom, and that is the kind of step-by-step liberation the Buddha meant for us to discover, not through the mind, but through a heart that's learning to breathe again day by day. So, if you're walking this path of letting go, know this: you are not alone. Each time you choose peace instead of reaction, forgiveness instead of resentment, you're planting seeds of freedom in your soul. This path is not easy, but every small step you take is a step closer to serenity. There are things in life that don't need to be won, only released. There are people who don't need to understand, you only be let go. And there are wounds that don't need to be erased, only seen in the light of awareness. If this message touched something in you, I invite you to subscribe to our channel, Buddhism Seeds, and walk with us as we nurture peace, wisdom, and compassion through every video. Please like this video, share it with someone who needs it today, and leave a comment below what stayed with you. After hearing these words, I truly look forward to reading your reflections. Until next time, may your path be light and your breath steady.